In the quiet expanses of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, nestled amongst rolling hills and fertile farmlands, lay the land that would become the town of Millersville. Back then, the place bore no name, it was simply an untamed wilderness, an inviting canvas for settlers to paint their dreams upon. By the early 1770s, a hardy man named John Miller, along with his family, had ventured into these lands from eastern Pennsylvania, drawn by the promise of opportunity. Over the years, they carved a homestead from the wilderness, raising livestock, tilling fields, and building a grand mill by the creek that meandered through their land. They named it Miller's Mill, and so the first spark of civilization was ignited in the verdant landscape. It was 1777. As the news of Miller's successful endeavor traveled, it attracted more settlers to the area, and by the dawn of the 19th century, a small hamlet had grown around the mill. The place was christened Millersburg, paying homage to the family who had first broken the land. Life was hard but simple, and the people were a tight-knit community, working from dawn to dusk, tending to their lands, their animals, and their growing families. But as the settlement flourished, whispers began to drift among the settlers' stories about a creature prowling in the shadows. It began with farmers noticing that their livestock was getting slaughtered at night, sheep and cattle torn apart, their remains strewn about their pens. It wasn't the work of a bear or a wolf, the brutality of the killings spoke of a creature much more fearsome. Then came the sightings. A hulking figure, standing on two legs, with a canine-like head and glowing eyes that reflected the moonlight, almost man-like, but not quite. The settlers called it the Dogman. Fear seeped into Millersburg. People started barricading their homes at night, rarely straying far from the safety of their dwellings. Parents clung to their children, whispering words of comfort as the howling wind carried the creature's eerie howls from the darkness beyond. By 1820, the hamlet had evolved into a small town, now known as Millerstown. The fear of the Dogman had become a part of their lives, an unsettling undercurrent that pulsed beneath the day-to-day monotony of farming life. But the stories persisted, growing more horrifying with each passing year. The Dogman was said to possess a monstrous strength, able to tear a full-grown horse apart. Others spoke of its speed and stealth, claiming it could move through the forest without a sound, only to strike without warning. The sightings grew more frequent. Farmers found their fields trampled, as if a large creature had rampaged through them in the night. Sometimes, a high, mournful howl would echo across the hills, freezing the blood of those who heard it. Despite the terror the Dogman inflicted, Millerstown continued to thrive. As the decades passed, new generations were born into the shadow of the Dogman's legacy, accepting it as a terrible fact of life, an unspoken part of their town's history. This collective fear united them, and in an odd way, it shaped them, creating a community bound by a shared nightmare that lurked on the edge of their dreams. And so, as the 19th century wore on, the terror of the Dogman became ingrained in the fabric of Millerstown. Its story was whispered around fireplaces, handed down from parents to children, a grim reminder of the darkness that prowled in the woods beyond their homes. The residents learned to live with the fear, carrying on with their lives under the ever-present shadow of the Dogman. But the tale of this creature would forever haunt the history of the town, a chilling echo from the past that continued to resonate through the years. As Millerstown moved into the mid-19th century, the community continued to expand, yet the formidable presence of the Dogman remained a chilling constant. As the town grew, so did the sightings of the creature and the unsettling stories that echoed around the community. In the 1840s, a schoolhouse was built, a charming brick structure where children of the town were to receive their education. The schoolhouse was located on the town's outskirts, near the dense forest, away from most homes. Despite the safety measures undertaken, lanterns that burned throughout the night, a sturdy lock on the door, and a rotating night watch, the unceasing unease lingered. One winter morning in 1845, the schoolmaster, Mr. Jacob Harrison, a stern yet respected man, arrived at the schoolhouse to find the front door ripped from its hinges. Inside, the furniture was overturned, books torn apart, and an eerie silence filled the room. On the snow-covered grounds, he found massive paw prints, much larger than any wolf or bear, circling the schoolhouse, leading back to the depths of the forest. Despite the lack of any direct attack, the incident was enough to terrorize the people further. Parents became more reluctant to send their children to the schoolhouse, especially during winter when the days were shorter and nights longer. The incident prompted the town to shift the school closer to the center, away from the threatening shadows of the woodland. By the 1850s, a railway line was proposed through Lancaster County, promising prosperity but also bringing apprehension to the folks of Millerstown. The construction would tear through the forest, the lair of the Dogman. Many feared that this intrusion would only aggravate the creature, inviting its wrath upon the town. But progress couldn't be halted. In 1857, when the construction began, the workers reported strange occurrences: tools missing, sounds of heavy breathing from the surrounding woods, and an inexplicable sense of dread that hung over them. Some nights, they could hear mournful howls that echoed down the valleys, striking fear into their hearts. The sightings of the creature became more frequent, its figure often seen on the outskirts of the forests, watching, waiting. As the railway line was completed in the late 1850s, bringing a wave of new settlers and business to Millerstown, the tales of the Dogman spread further. It became a sort of urban legend, a campfire story told to scare newcomers. Yet for those who had lived long enough in the town, the fear was real. Every unexplained disappearance, every mutilated livestock, they all pointed towards the existence of the horrifying creature. By the 1860s, with the onset of the Civil War, many of the town's young men were drawn away to battle. The town was left vulnerable, its protective layer of able-bodied men thinning. In these trying times, the Dogman's presence seemed to loom larger. The howls grew louder, the sightings more frequent, and the livestock deaths more gruesome. Millerstown was not only fighting a war on the battlefronts, but also a silent, cold war at home. A war against an unseen enemy, the chilling presence of which was a constant reminder of the relentless terror that had gripped the town since its founding. The year 1873 marked the town's renaming to Millersville, reflecting its growth and development. Yet, beneath the town's prosperity, the terror of the Dogman remained, a dark shadow cast over the town's history, a haunting legacy passed down through generations. The silent agreement among the town's folks was to endure, to live alongside this terror, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit against the persistent dread. A dread that was as much a part of Millersville's identity as its rich history and resilient people. This legacy of terror continued through the late 19th century and into the early 20th century, an ever-present shadow on the heart of the town, a chilling reminder of the beast that lurked in the wilderness. The Dogman had become a legend, a horrifying specter woven into the very fabric of Millersville's identity. By the dawn of the 20th century, Millersville had grown from a small farming town into a prosperous hub. The railway had brought significant wealth and people to the area, and despite the ever-present threat of the Dogman, the townsfolk persevered. They built more homes, established businesses, and even opened a state normal school, which would later become the renowned Millersville University. However, this growth seemed to only provoke the Dogman further. Sightings became more frequent and brazen. No longer just a creature of the night, it was now seen in the harsh light of day, its hulking form emerging from the forest to instill terror before disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. In 1910, a farmer named Elias Krieger discovered something truly horrific. Out in his cornfield, he found the remains of his farmhand, or what was left of him. The scene was gruesome, the kind of butchery that left even the toughest men in town pale-faced and nauseated. The poor man had been torn apart, unmistakable evidence of the Dogman's handiwork. This was the first human victim of the Dogman the town had seen, marking a horrifying escalation in the creature's activities. News of the grisly incident spread through the town like wildfire, and once again, a paralyzing fear gripped Millersville. The townsfolk demanded action, but what could they do against a creature of nightmares, a specter that had haunted them for more than a century? In a bid to protect the town, a group of brave men decided to venture into the forest. Armed with hunting rifles and guided by a grim determination, they attempted to track the beast. After 3 tense days and nights, they returned, visibly shaken and empty-handed. They spoke of an eerie silence in the forest, of feeling watched, of a dread so palpable they could taste it. But of the Dogman, they found no trace. As the decades rolled on, the story of the Dogman became increasingly intertwined with Millersville's history. It was a chilling undercurrent to the town's prosperity, an unwelcome guest at every celebration, a specter haunting every quiet moment. Throughout the World War I years and into the Roaring Twenties, Millersville saw a flurry of activity. People were too busy rebuilding their lives and chasing prosperity to give much thought to the Dogman. The creature seemed to retreat, the number of sightings dropped, and for a time, it seemed like the town had finally gotten a respite from the haunting terror. However, the Great Depression of the 1930s hit the town hard. As if echoing the townsfolk's misery, the Dogman resurfaced, its howls resonating through the bleak, empty streets. The monster was not just a threat now, it was a symbol of their hardship, their struggles, their despair. Despite the town's growth, its rich history, and its brave people, the presence of the Dogman remained a relentless constant. From the founding days of the settlement in the late 18th century to the troubling times of the early 20th century, the monster was a chilling part of Millersville's identity. It was a tale told in hushed voices, a bone-chilling legend, a nightmare that refused to end. This was Millersville, a town haunted not just by a beast lurking in its forests, but by the fear that had seeped into its very bones. The dark cloud of the Great Depression lingered through the 1930s. It seemed like the soul of the town was trapped in an endless winter. Just like the people of Millersville, the Dogman too seemed affected by the dreary atmosphere. The creature's attacks became more ferocious, its howls more desperate. The once prosperous town was now gripped by two terrors, one a financial ruin and the other, a monstrous legend. The advent of World War II in the early 1940s, however, brought about a noticeable change. As young men were called upon to serve their country, a renewed sense of purpose filled the air. This energy seemed to seep into the fight against the Dogman as well. The remaining townsfolk, resilient as ever, rallied together, setting up night watches and safeguarding their homes and livestock. As the war raged on across the world, so did the battle against the Dogman in Millersville. Stories of encounters with the beast became as common as letters from the war front. Each sighting, each narrow escape, added a new chapter to the already extensive lore of the Dogman. But it was in the harsh winter of 1943 that the town would experience the most frightening encounter with the Dogman. An air raid drill, a common practice in those days, was interrupted by a powerful howl that sent a shiver down everyone's spine. Suddenly, there it was, at the edge of town, its silhouette visible under the flickering lights of the drill. For the first time, most of the townsfolk saw the creature not as a shadow in the corner of their eye or a shape lurking in the dark but standing there, visible to all, a terrible reality they had to live with. Post-war, the 1950s brought with it an era of recovery and prosperity. Millersville began to regain its economic footing, its heart beating with the hustle and bustle of industry. A newfound sense of hope and optimism was palpable in the town. Yet, even as life gradually returned to normal, the Dogman remained a cruel reminder of the past, its existence an unsolved mystery that the town carried into each new decade. In the 1960s and 70s, as modernity slowly started seeping into Millersville, the Dogman sightings became less frequent. But every now and then, an incident would occur: a pet disappearing, unexplained claw marks on trees, or a chilling howl in the dead of the night that would remind the town of the presence of the beast. In the 1980s, Millersville saw a significant transformation with the expansion of Millersville University. The influx of students brought a new, youthful energy to the town. Unfamiliar with the legend of the Dogman, these young adults were intrigued and skeptical. To them, the Dogman was an urban legend, a ghost story that the townies liked to tell. But their skepticism couldn't erase the chilling presence of the creature that lurked in the town's memory. As the town stepped into the 21st century, the legend of the Dogman had become a crucial part of its history, passed down through generations, woven into the fabric of Millersville. The creature's existence was now more of a folk tale, a story told to scare naughty children or a chilling anecdote shared over a beer at the local tavern. But for those who had lived it, the fear was real and palpable, a haunting legacy of a terror that refused to fade. By the early 2000s, Millersville had evolved into a charming blend of the past and present, a modern town that held its history close to its heart. Yet, under the surface of this peaceful community, the legend of the Dogman persisted, a chilling narrative that reminded the townsfolk of the darker times, of the unseen terror that had once gripped their town, and might still lurk in the shadows of their beloved Millersville. With the turn of the millennium, Millersville continued to evolve. Yet, the local lore's grim character, the Dogman, remained an inseparable part of the town's identity. Its legend was no longer whispered in hushed tones of fear but spoken about openly, with a sense of uneasy fascination. The creature was now as much a part of the town's history as the founding Millers family or the prestigious university. Throughout the early 2000s, the beast became less of a menace and more of a myth, a tale to tell over the dinner table or during late-night student gatherings. The sightings decreased, yet never truly ceased. There were always incidents, eerie reminders that couldn't be explained logically: pets disappearing, unaccounted livestock losses, or peculiarly large paw prints in the outskirts. It was as though the Dogman, while receding from view, ensured it was never forgotten. In 2005, the town commemorated its rich history by opening the Millersville Historical Society, a dedicated space to explore the area's past. Alongside exhibits on the town's agricultural origins and its academic achievements, there was an unexpected addition: a section dedicated to the legend of the Dogman. Here, the tale of the Dogman was recounted with dramatic flair, using old newspaper clippings, historical accounts, and a speculative model of the creature itself. Its howl, recreated with audio effects, echoed in the halls of the museum. The town had accepted the Dogman not just as a grim part of its past but also as an intriguing aspect of its cultural heritage. By 2010, Millersville was no longer a small farming town haunted by a creature of nightmares. It had grown into a thriving, diverse community of students, educators, and families. The railway, once a symbol of fear for inviting the creature's wrath, now stood for the town's connection to the world beyond the dense forests. Yet, the monster's presence could still be felt, an uncanny shiver down the spine on a cold winter night, an unexplained rustle in the woods, a howl carried by the wind. Every resident knew the tale of the Dogman, every visitor heard whispers of its legend. The creature had been woven into the town's very DNA, as much a part of Millersville as its people. In 2010, Millersville stood as a testament to the indomitable human spirit that had stared down the horrifying legend of the Dogman and used it not as a reason for fear, but a symbol of their endurance and resilience. As the town grew and developed, the legend of the Dogman endured, a chilling narrative forever embedded in the town's history, its legacy shaping the identity of Millersville as the town moved into the new decade. 2011 came with the promise of another peaceful year for the town of Millersville. The thriving community had learned to live alongside the legend of the Dogman, the creature's eerie presence woven into the town's history and identity. But the peace was shattered when Mayor James Patterson, a man of great integrity and a beloved figure of the community, mysteriously disappeared. Mayor Patterson was known to enjoy late-night walks around town. On the fateful night of his disappearance, witnesses reported seeing him stroll towards the outskirts of Millersville, towards the dense woods that had long been associated with the Dogman. It was the last time anyone saw him. His sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through Millersville. A comprehensive search was quickly organized, involving local law enforcement, the town's residents, and students from the university. They combed through the town and the surrounding woods, hoping against hope to find some trace of the beloved mayor. Days turned into weeks, and the search for Mayor Patterson gradually evolved from hopeful to grim. Then, on a chilling winter morning, a search party found what they had been dreading. In a remote, seldom trekked part of the forest, they found the mayor's overcoat, his identification still in the pocket, near an ominous sight: unusually large, animalistic paw prints, far bigger than any local wildlife could make. There was no sign of a struggle, no further trace of the mayor. It was as if he had vanished, leaving behind only his coat and a chilling reminder of the town's legendary monster. The town was plunged into mourning, and for the first time in many years, the shadow of the Dogman loomed large and menacing over Millersville. The legend was no longer just a tale from the past or an eerie museum exhibit, it was now a horrifying reality that had claimed one of their own. In the wake of the tragedy, the town was more united than ever. The people of Millersville, resilient as always, held each other close, sharing stories of Mayor Patterson's kindness and his unwavering love for his town. Amid the fear and sorrow, the community's spirit remained unbroken. They mourned, they remembered, and they carried on, their resilience a stark contrast against the lurking fear of the Dogman. The disappearance of Mayor Patterson became another chilling chapter in the legend of the Dogman, a grim reminder of the monstrous specter that haunted the town. Millersville moved on, but the loss of their mayor and the echoing fear of the Dogman served as a dark undercurrent to their daily lives, a horrifying secret shared by the entire town as they stepped further into the decade. As the years passed, the memory of Mayor Patterson's disappearance never faded from the collective consciousness of Millersville. Instead, it sparked a determined resolution among the townsfolk. Enough was enough. It was time to face the menace that had lurked in their midst for centuries. It was time to confront the Dogman. In 2015, a group of brave townsfolk, led by Police Chief Matthew Collins, initiated Operation Howl's End. They were a diverse group: experienced hunters, retired military personnel, skilled trackers, even brave university students. All shared a common goal: to hunt down the Dogman and end its reign of terror. For months, they prepared. Old town records and first-hand accounts were studied for patterns in the creature's behavior. Hunters and trackers shared their expertise on how to handle large predators. Every resident of Millersville contributed in their own way, whether by offering supplies or simply supporting their brave defenders. The operation was launched on a cold, clear night in November. Armed with high-powered rifles and reinforced with protective gear, the group ventured into the depths of the forest, guided by the full moon and a steely determination. Days turned into weeks as they pursued the elusive creature. There were moments of fear, moments of doubt, but they pressed on. Finally, on a bone-chilling December night, they heard an unmistakable, monstrous howl that seemed to resonate from the very belly of the forest. Guided by the eerie sound, they discovered the lair of the Dogman. Nestled in a cavernous outcrop, it was littered with remnants of its gruesome feasts. There, under the cold, harsh glare of their torchlights, they saw the Dogman, as fearsome as the legends described. Standing at an intimidating height, its eyes glinted ominously in the darkness, a low growl resonating from deep within it. The confrontation was intense and terrifying. Bullets were fired, shouts echoed, and the Dogman retaliated with a ferocity that was overwhelming. But the people of Millersville stood their ground. Their spirit, born of centuries of fear and loss, was unyielding. The skirmish ended as swiftly as it had started, leaving behind a silence that hung heavy in the air. The Dogman, the monster that had haunted them for centuries, lay lifeless on the forest floor. The reign of terror had ended. News of the Dogman's demise spread through Millersville like wildfire. Relief washed over the town, and the night echoed with cheers of victory. There was a collective sense of liberation, a weight lifted off their shoulders, a darkness lifted from their hearts. In the years that followed, Millersville thrived like never before. The legend of the Dogman was still told, but no longer with fear. It was a story of their past, a chapter of their history that showcased their resilience. They had faced their monster, and they had prevailed. The townsfolk set up a memorial for Mayor Patterson and all the previous victims in the heart of the town, a reminder of their struggle and their victory. Millersville stepped into a new era, unshackled from the fear of the Dogman. As 2010 drew to a close, the town stood a symbol of resilience, a testament to the human spirit's ability to face its fears and triumph over them. The town of Millersville was finally free of the Dogman, their history no longer shadowed by the monstrous legend. They had reclaimed their town from the clutches of the beast and emerged stronger than ever, ready to face a new decade with hope and an unyielding spirit. The townsfolk, triumphant and filled with a renewed sense of liberation, decided to add another chapter to the Dogman's legacy. The monstrous creature that had for so long instilled fear in their hearts would now serve as a symbol of their victory and resilience. It was decided the Dogman would be preserved and put on display for all to see. They enlisted the help of professional taxidermists, people well versed in the art of preserving and mounting animals. It was an intricate process that required skill and finesse, especially given the Dogman's massive size and unusual physiology. The taxidermists worked diligently, handling the deceased creature with a mixture of trepidation and awe. While the process was ongoing, the Millersville Historical Society prepared a special exhibit for the Dogman. The display was to be grand yet respectful, a testament to the creature's fearsome legacy and the town's remarkable victory. In 2017, on a bright summer's day, the display was unveiled to the public. The once feared Dogman now stood frozen in time, a formidable figure that served as a stark reminder of the town's past. The exhibit was titled Triumph Over Terror, The End of the Dogman, a fitting name for Millersville's triumph over its centuries-old terror. The sight of the Dogman, once a figure of nightmares, now standing defeated and on display, sparked a mixture of emotions among the townsfolk. For some, it was a release, a tangible sign that the nightmare was truly over. For others, it was a moment of pride, a symbol of their collective strength and resilience. Over the years, the Dogman exhibit became a point of interest for residents and visitors alike. People from all over came to witness the legendary creature that had shaped Millersville's history in such a profound way. Every visitor left with a greater understanding of the town's journey, of its struggle and ultimate victory over the monstrous Dogman. The people of Millersville had transformed their fear into strength, their terror into triumph. The stuffed Dogman, displayed prominently in the Millersville Historical Society, stood not as a symbol of horror but as a monument to the town's resilience and strength. They had taken back their history from the beast that had once haunted them, ensuring that the Dogman's reign of terror would forever remain a relic of the past. The mood in Millersville was one of bitter triumph. Decades of fear and loss fueled their resolve. This wasn't a creature to be respected. It was a monster, a blight on their town's history. Its defeat wasn't just a victory, it was a liberation. It was time for Millersville to have the last word. The Dogman's body was handed over to the town's most audacious taxidermist, known for his unconventional methods. The creature that had once haunted their dreams was now an object under his skilled hands. The preservation was unceremonious, the creature's features were exaggerated to emphasize its bestial nature. Its eyes, once glowing with menace, were replaced with dull, glassy facsimiles, forever robbing the beast of its intimidating gaze. Its mouth was pulled into an eternal snarl, a grim parody of the fear it once invoked. When it was finally time to display the Dogman, the townsfolk decided against placing it in the Millersville Historical Society. Instead, it was relegated to a far less dignified location, the town dump. The once feared Dogman was now perched atop a mound of garbage, a grotesque sentinel amidst discarded furniture and rotting scraps. Its former reign of terror was now a mere spectacle, a figure of ridicule rather than fear. Children would throw stones at it, a testament to how far the beast had fallen. It became a town tradition, a rite of passage for the young ones to take their best shot at the Dogman. The monstrous figure, once the stuff of nightmares, was now the butt of jokes and the target of stones. Word spread far and wide, and soon people from neighboring towns would visit, just to take a glimpse of the defeated beast. It was a twisted sort of tourist attraction, a physical embodiment of Millersville's defiance. Millersville had faced their monster, and they had not just survived, but emerged victorious. The beast that had once terrorized them was now a symbol of their victory, of their refusal to be ruled by fear. The people of Millersville had reclaimed their town, and they made sure the Dogman would never be forgotten, for all the wrong reasons. Just as Millersville was basking in its hard-earned peace, a chilling howl echoed through the stillness of the night in the winter of 2013. The dreadful sound made blood run cold and sent shivers down spines. It was a sound the residents knew all too well, a grim echo of their past. The Dogman was no more, or so they had thought. The first signs of the new terror emerged at the outskirts of town. Livestock started disappearing, only to be found mutilated in the surrounding woods, reminiscent of the first Dogman's gruesome feasts. The eerie silence of the woods was again broken by the guttural growls and monstrous howls of a beast, sounds that brought back the chilling memories of the terror that had once gripped Millersville. Despite their initial disbelief, the people of Millersville could not ignore the mounting evidence. The new creature, though similar, was distinct from its predecessor. It was larger, more brutal, its attacks more frenzied. The carcasses of its victims bore witness to its savagery, their mutilated bodies a horrific testament to the new Dogman's bloodlust. As the massacres escalated, fear once again spread through Millersville. The stuffed figure of the original Dogman in the town dump, once a symbol of triumph, now served as a grim reminder of the terror that had returned to haunt them. The town was back in the grip of the Dogman, but this time, it faced a beast far more monstrous than before. The news of the second Dogman swept through the town like a chilling winter wind, rekindling old fears and inciting a new wave of terror. Yet, in the face of this revived menace, the people of Millersville stood resolute. They had faced the terror before, and they were determined to face it again. The second reign of the Dogman had begun, painting a terrifying picture of the years to come. But the town of Millersville, scarred but unbroken, stood ready to face the beast. The story of their resilience continued, the shadow of the new Dogman looming over them, promising a horrifying saga of blood, terror, and a fight to reclaim their town once again. In the cold months of 2014, as the brutal massacres continued, a chilling revelation sent a wave of horror through Millersville. The idea that had been too dreadful to consider, too terrifying to even whisper, was now a horrifying reality. The Dogman was not a solitary beast but an entire pack that had been breeding and surviving in the shadows for centuries. The realization shook the very foundations of Millersville. The threat they faced was no longer singular but multiplied, each member of the pack potentially as deadly as the one they had defeated years before. The horrifying echoes of monstrous howls resonating through the town weren't just echoes of one beast, but many. The escalation in the frequency and savagery of the attacks made horrifying sense now. They weren't just dealing with a singular, more brutal Dogman, they were facing a whole pack, each member driven by the same bloodlust that had terrorized the town for centuries. As dread set in, the town found itself at the heart of a nightmare it had never anticipated. The sight of the stuffed Dogman at the dump, once a symbol of their victory, now seemed to mock their naivete. They had celebrated the defeat of one monster, oblivious to the fact that an entire pack lurked in the shadows, biding their time. The year 2015 witnessed a relentless onslaught. With a pack of Dogmen prowling the outskirts, no one was safe. Livestock was ravaged, properties were damaged, and the people of Millersville lived in constant terror. The town was under siege, the horrors of the past repeated manifold. Yet, in the face of this multiplied terror, the spirit of Millersville was undeterred. This was their town, their home, and they would not surrender it to the monstrous pack. They had stood against the terror before, and they would do so again, no matter the odds. Their unity and resolve became their shield, their collective courage their weapon. As the Dogman howled in the darkness, a defiant echo resonated through Millersville. A town standing resolute, a people united against the terror, ready to face their nightmares once more. The story of Millersville's courage had turned a grim new page, but the town stood ready, refusing to be consumed by the shadows cast by the monstrous Dogman pack. The first frost of 2016 had barely settled when the unthinkable happened. Under the veil of the night, the Dogman pack launched an audacious assault on Millersville. It was a chilling spectacle, a night of terror that the town would never forget. The Dogman, moving as a single terrifying force, invaded the quiet streets. They smashed through doors, shattered windows, and left a trail of destruction in their wake. Their monstrous howls echoed through the night, an anthem of terror that spread panic throughout the town. People were dragged from their homes, their screams joining the cacophony of the horrific symphony. Livestock were slaughtered, homes were razed, and the once tranquil town was plunged into chaos. Yet, in the face of this horrifying onslaught, the spirit of Millersville remained unbroken. As their town burned and their loved ones were threatened, the people of Millersville rose to face the nightmare. Armed with whatever they could find, shotguns, axes, pitchforks, the residents of Millersville fought back. Every street became a battlefield, every home a fortress. The night air was filled with the sounds of gunfire, the roar of fires, and the defiance of a town refusing to succumb. Despite the Dogman's strength and numbers, they were met with fierce resistance. The people of Millersville, driven by desperation and courage, fought with a ferocity that surprised even the monstrous invaders. For every resident dragged away, another stood in their place, fighting tooth and nail to protect their town. By dawn, the once peaceful town of Millersville was a war zone. Smoke rose from the ashes of burnt homes, the streets were littered with the evidence of the night's gruesome battle. The Dogman pack had retreated, leaving behind a town scarred but standing, its people battered but unbowed. The battle marked a turning point for Millersville. It was no longer a town under siege, but a town at war. The Dogman had revealed their full strength, but so had the people of Millersville. They had faced the night of terror and survived, a testament to their unyielding spirit. Now, they were ready to take the fight to the Dogman pack, to put an end to the centuries-old reign of terror. The war had begun, and Millersville was ready to fight. The war against the Dogman pack, once a grim reality the people of Millersville had to grapple with, had now morphed into a rallying cry for retaliation. After witnessing the brutality of the pack's assault, the townsfolk's fear was replaced by a burning desire for vengeance. In the wake of the raid, the town convened a meeting. The assembly was a diverse mix of the town's population: farmers, shopkeepers, school teachers, even the elderly. The horrific events of the previous night were still fresh in their minds. However, their terror had transformed into resolve. Mayor Wallace, a stout man known for his brusque manner and decisive nature, stood at the front. He proposed a plan that seemed as dangerous as it was desperate. Yet, desperation bred determination. It was time to turn the tides against their monstrous foes. They would fight fire with fire. Armed with kerosene, torches, and an ironclad resolve, the people of Millersville moved out under the veil of darkness. Their goal was the dense, unexplored forest that skirted their town, a place suspected to be the hideout of the Dogman pack. As they neared the entrance to the woods, the air grew colder, the oppressive silence amplifying their own heartbeat. It was the same haunting stillness that had, for centuries, preceded the brutal attacks of the Dogman pack. With a deep breath, they lit their torches, the flickering flames dancing like fiery spirits in the darkness. Then, with a shared nod of understanding, they hurled the flaming torches into the woods. What ensued was a spectacle of primal fury. The flames spread rapidly, turning the night into a surreal canvas of light and shadow. The woods, once a dark fortress for the Dogman pack, were now an inferno, the fiery tongues of the blaze reaching out like vengeful spirits. The chilling howls that cut through the night air were different this time. They were cries of surprise, of confusion, and, for the first time in centuries, of fear. The hunters had become the hunted, the tormentors now the tormented. By the break of dawn, the inferno had reduced to smoldering embers. As the smoke lifted, it revealed a sight that would be forever etched in the history of Millersville. The once feared woods were now a charred skeleton of their past, and with it, the reign of the Dogman pack had been burned away. Millersville, for the first time in centuries, breathed a sigh of relief. Their town was their own again, no longer under the shadow of the Dogman pack. The dawn of that day marked not just the end of the gruesome night but the beginning of a new era for Millersville. An era of freedom, peace, and the triumphant spirit of humanity. In the smoky haze of the morning after, a group of townsfolk ventured into the blackened skeleton of the once mighty forest. Their eyes stung with the remnants of the fire, and their hearts pounded in their chests as they tread on the ashy remains of what had been the Dogman's fortress for centuries. As the sun continued to rise, the smoke began to clear. One by one, they started to see them, the remains. Bones, charred and scattered around the forest floor, stark against the dark backdrop of the burnt woodland. Bones that bore the unmistakable features of the Dogman: elongated skulls, towering rib cages, powerful jaws. The sight of them brought a wave of relief, shock, and the unmistakable sensation of victory. They had done it. They had defeated the Dogman. News of the discovery spread through Millersville like wildfire, lifting the weight of centuries-old terror from their hearts. The streets filled with an air of victory and relief. Mothers hugged their children tighter, neighbors greeted each other with smiles of genuine peace, and for the first time in centuries, the nights were void of the fear of monstrous howls. The following weeks saw the charred remains of the Dogman carefully collected and placed in the town's museum, a grim reminder of the terror they had faced, the war they had waged, and the victory they had achieved. The bones of the Dogman, once the symbol of their dread, now stood as a testament to their courage and resilience. As time passed, life in Millersville regained its tranquility. The town blossomed in the peace that had been hard-earned, and the memory of the Dogman slowly faded into the realm of legends. Stories of the monstrous creatures and the town's brave fight were passed down through generations, becoming a part of the rich tapestry of Millersville's history. In the years that followed, the story of Millersville and its battle against the Dogman became a beacon of human resilience, a symbol of the triumph of humanity over its fears. The town, which had once lived under the shadow of the Dogman, now stood in the light of its victory, its people free of the nightmarish reign of the beasts. And so, the saga of the Dogman ended, but the story of Millersville and its brave inhabitants continued, the memory of their triumph echoing through the tranquil streets, and resonating in the peaceful nights, forever etching the tale of their courage in the annals of time. As years passed, the bones of the Dogman became a poignant part of Millersville's museum, a somber reminder of the nightmare the town had faced and overcame. But as the town healed, the wounds of the past scarred over, and the bones became less of a solemn memento and more a stark reminder of their fear and suffering. The day arrived in 2018, when the mayor, standing tall and proud in front of the whole town, announced a new dawn for Millersville, a final step in moving away from the terror that had ruled them for so long. The bones of the Dogman were to be destroyed, a very clear and disrespectful act against the creatures that had caused them so much pain. Gathered in the town square, the people of Millersville watched as the bones were placed in the middle, a heap of grim reminders about to be obliterated. Some watched with a sense of trepidation, others with grim satisfaction, but all with the shared understanding that this was their moment of absolute closure. With a sledgehammer in hand, the mayor delivered the first blow. The sound echoed through the silent square, a loud, cathartic crack that signaled the beginning of the end. One by one, other members of the town took their turn, each blow smashing the bones to pieces, each shattering fragment a symbol of their victory. The crowd cheered with every hit, their roars of approval rising into the sky, as the monstrous bones were reduced to nothing more than fragments. The act was not just about disrespecting the fallen monsters but a final assertion of their triumph. They were free, and this act of destruction was their ultimate proclamation of that freedom. Once the bones were utterly smashed, the remnants were collected and transported to the town dump. The act was a symbolic one. The same place where they had once proudly displayed the body of the first Dogman, now held the final, crushed remnants of the pack. That evening, the people of Millersville celebrated like they had never done before. The town square was filled with laughter, dancing, and an overwhelming sense of relief. The Dogman were no more, their reign of terror nothing more than stories of the past. As the years moved on, the town continued to flourish, growing and thriving without the shadow of the Dogman looming over them. The smashed bones, the disrespectful display, all served as the final nail in the coffin for the town's fear, marking an end to the dark chapters of the past and welcoming a future where they stood victorious. Mayor Wallace, his pride in his town's triumph reflected in his broad smile and bright eyes, stood before the jubilant crowd gathered at the town square. Microphone in hand, he waited for the cheers to subside before he began. His voice, gruff but filled with a potent mix of joy and defiance, cut through the air. "Good people of Millersville," he began, his booming voice echoing around the square. The crowd hushed, their eager eyes fixed on their leader. "Today, we stand here, victorious, and I can't help but say, it feels damned good." The crowd roared in approval, laughter punctuating the cheer-filled air. "But you know what feels even better," he continued, his smile widening. "Knowing that while we, the people of Millersville, stood up and fought, the rest of the civilized towns and cities sat back and watched." His words, biting and bold, rippled through the crowd, eliciting a wave of laughter and applause. Wallace basked in it, his smile growing more prominent. "They said we were mad, that we were chasing legends and fairy tales." His voice rang out, each word etched with the satisfaction of proving them wrong. "Well, those sons of bitches were sitting pretty in their cozy homes while we were out here kicking monster ass." A surge of laughter and cheers erupted from the crowd. People clapped, hooted, and whistled, swept up in the boldness of their mayor's words. They hid behind their walls, while we faced our fears head-on. Their manicured hands never held a weapon, never felt the fear, the adrenaline of the fight. Hell, the toughest decision they ever made was probably what brand of coffee to sip in the morning. More laughter echoed through the square, the people of Millersville reveling in their mayor's audacious speech. "But us," he continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, "we were built different. We faced down a nightmare, and we crushed it. We didn't hide, didn't run. So, to every town, every city out there, that thinks they're better, I have one thing to say, you're a bunch of pansies compared to us." The crowd erupted into a thunderous applause, cheering for their victory, their courage, and their unyielding spirit. Mayor Wallace's speech was a final defiant cry, an unapologetic mockery aimed at the ones who doubted them. They had faced the monsters, had overcome the impossible, and they wore their triumph proudly. The reign of the Dogman was over, and the reign of Millersville's indomitable spirit had begun. But the legend will never die, as where there is one pack there will always be a rival, one waiting to assert dominance. For now the town of Millersville lies safe at night, proudly marching through the former forest, planting new brilliant redwoods in place of the old and dead oak and fledgling tress. The question is, will this new woods be safe forever?